If you grew up in the 2000s, you definitely know who Akon is. He's one of the biggest names in music and has performed shows with tens of thousands of people enjoying his tracks. But in 2024, he had a low-key performance that definitely wasn't enjoyed by one person in the crowd. The man next to Akon thought he was meeting a minor. Instead, he walked into a sting operation broadcast live to thousands of viewers on Kick. Akon was there to participate in a format that has become one of the most profitable content categories on the internet. Today, a quick search for predator catchers on YouTube pulls up hundreds of dedicated channels generating tens of millions of views. The concept has evolved into its own highly structured niche, and to understand how this specific brand of online content got so popular, we have to look back at the television network that created the blueprint. 20 years ago, NBC and Chris Hansen introduced this concept to the masses with To Catch a Predator, and over the last decade, independent creators adopted Hansen's formula and built an entirely new ecosystem online. They evolved from uncoordinated amateurs into highly structured operations that routinely force local prosecutors to act. This is the story of how a television show became YouTube's fastest growing genre. To Catch a Predator launched as a Dateline NBC investigative segment in November 2004 in a partnership with an online vigilante group called Perverted Justice. The volunteers would pose as minors in chat rooms and adult men would arrange to meet them. The men would then arrive at a sting house rigged with hidden cameras with a decoy that would chat them up, only for Hansen to walk in and deliver that trademark.
Oh, right there, please have a seat. Why don't you take a seat right over there? Why don't you have a seat right there, please?
Have a seat right there, please.
Why don't you have a seat right over there? Why don't you have a seat right over there, please?
To say the format worked is an understatement. At its peak in 2006, To Catch a Predator pulled around 9 million viewers a night, roughly 2 million more than a typical Dateline NBC episode, and became the most popular segment the show had ever aired. But, and this is where the first crack appears, in 2006, Dateline's crew followed a man named Bill Conrad to his home in Murphy, Texas. Conrad was an assistant district attorney. The police, working alongside the production, attempted to serve a search warrant, and while doing so, Conrad shot himself in his own house as the production crew was standing outside. His sister, Patricia Conrad, sued NBC for $105 million. NBC moved to dismiss, however, the judge, Denny Chin, refused, writing, "A reasonable jury could find there was no legitimate law enforcement need for a heavily armed SWAT team to extract a 56-year-old prosecutor from his home when he was not accused of any actual violence and was not believed to have a gun. A reasonable jury could find that by doing so, NBC created a substantial risk of suicide or other harm, and that it engaged in conduct so outrageous and extreme that no civilized society should tolerate it." The case settled out of court in June 2008 for an undisclosed sum, with the last episode of To Catch a Predator airing 6 months prior. Hansen, for his part, when asked about the suicide 2 weeks after it happened, told a reporter, "If you're asking, do I feel responsible? No. I sleep well at night." Here's what NBC didn't see coming though. While they could cancel a show, they couldn't cancel the appetite for it. By the time the last episode aired in December 2007,
Why don't you have a seat?
was already a freestanding piece of pop culture. South Park had parodied Hansen 2 months earlier in Le Petit Tourette, airing the catchphrase as literal mind control, while To Catch a Predator was technically still in production. The Boondocks did their own version in 2010 with A Date with the Booty Warrior. Even Family Guy had this bit.
I'm a virgin.
Not a deal breaker.
And I should let you know I'm Chris Hansen from To Catch a Predator.
Ah, crap, somebody shoot me.
The phrase migrated from broadcast to 4chan, then Reddit, then YouTube compilations, then Vine, then TikTok, where in 2026, it's still being remixed daily by people who weren't even alive when the original episodes aired. Hansen himself eventually got a cameo in the hit Amazon series, The Boys. 20 years on from the first broadcast, "Why don't you have a seat" is one of the most durable catchphrases the internet has ever produced, but NBC walked away from the format. Hansen knew that his show was beloved by millions, so in 2015, 8 years after the cancellation, he launched a Kickstarter to fund a spiritual successor called Hansen vs. Predator. The series eventually migrated onto YouTube as a recurring segment of a show called Crime Watch Daily, and the view counts were staggering. One catch alone has racked up over 70 million views as of writing this video. Jeff Sokol, the man in the video, was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison plus a 7-year suspended sentence. He was also required to register as a sex offender. But here's what a shrewd YouTuber's brain sees when watching that video. One sting on one afternoon in one rented house in Fairfield, Connecticut, produced a piece of content that's been generating views, ad revenue, and audience growth for 10 straight years and counting. Not only does the video still do absolute numbers, but to compound the attractiveness of this type of content, the offshoot was that an arrogant predator faced the justice he deserved, while the production cost was an Airbnb, a few cameras, a small crew, and the depravity of man. That's the economic insight that built this entire genre into what it is today. Most of the catchers who came after Hansen got in for their own reasons, and a lot of them are reasons you'd respect, but the math is what made it scalable. A 20-minute confrontation is one of the highest margin content products that's ever existed on the internet, and the algorithm agrees. But none of the new names we see today existed yet. Between Hansen's last NBC broadcast in 2007 and the EDP 445 catch in 2021, the moment the genre went fully mainstream on YouTube, there's roughly 14 years of dead air, minus the few episodes we got of Hansen vs. Predator. What filled that gap was a strange mix of genuine amateurs trying to do the work for real and opportunists who figured out you could fake the whole thing and the audience wouldn't care. The amateurs deserved the credit they never got, and the fakes accidentally proved something the real operators would later cash in on. Let's look at the OG amateurs first. These were the likes of Justin Payne in Canada, the Creep Catchers Network, and a handful of solo operators in the UK who were doing the same thing. Bait, meet, confront, post the video, years before the genre exploded. They didn't really blow up though, and there are 3 main reasons why. First, the work genuinely wasn't great. Justin Payne's most viral 2016 catch, a confrontation in a Toronto subway parking lot, pulled almost 500,000 views on Facebook, yet the man in the video was never charged. Meanwhile, Creep Catchers Network, which had hundreds of videos posted between 2015 and 2017, yielded a handful of arrests and, by one legal review's count, 0 convictions. In one case, an Edmonton police detective confirmed that a Creep Catchers chapter had actively interfered with an ongoing investigation, and Lloydminster Royal Canadian Mounted Police held a press conference in 2017 publicly accusing the group of disrupting their work and endangering officers. The work was sincere, but if we're being real, it was also bad. Second, the establishment was openly hostile. When that Payne video went viral, Toronto police spokesman Mark Pugash went on record calling the effort useless to investigators and warned Payne might be committing crimes himself by receiving illegal images from his targets. But the main issue was that they didn't want civilians doing this work a full stop. And third, the platforms just hadn't built the infrastructure yet. A long-form vigilante confrontation in 2016 had nowhere to live except a Facebook upload that 500,000 people would watch once and forget. But what was about to happen would change all 3 at once. Well, eventually. First, the genre had to survive its most embarrassing chapter. Between roughly 2017 and 2019, the most viewed predator catching content on YouTube was coming from a channel called Luxury Pranks, run by 2 brothers, Parker and Chester, who had pivoted from awkward pranks into gold digger pranks into catfish videos into what they started marketing as real predator catchers. The videos were pulling millions, with the most popular one hitting over 13 million views. There was only one problem though. The catchers were fake. All of them. The acting was stilted, the dialogue played like a bad sitcom, the predators delivered suspiciously quotable lines on cue, and maybe the biggest tell, none of them were ever handed to police. Every confrontation ended with the target just walking away, supposedly reformed by Parker's awkward scolding. The New Statesman magazine ran an expose in August 2018, and as a result, YouTube eventually stepped in and told the brothers they had to declare the content fictional or risk the whole channel. Parker and Chester complied, adding Social Experiment to the title and launching a second channel called Life of Luxury in late 2018, migrating their activity over through early 2019 and pivoting the whole operation into scripted paranormal horror. The brand is still going, and Life of Luxury is now sitting on more than 9 million subscribers. By every reasonable metric, this should have been the moment that buried the genre. But if anything, every YouTuber paying attention clocked the same data point. The format itself works whether it was real or not. The demand was that deep. This was the exact kind of signal that attracts the wrong kind of attention. Just before we get to the catchers who took this seriously, we have to talk about the version of this genre that showed up to milk it. Because in January 2024, something happened that broke the category wide open. A Russian-born former prank YouTuber named Vitaly Zdorovetsky went live on Kick with Aiden Ross and ran a predator catching session as live entertainment. Within 6 months, he had nearly 300,000 followers on the platform, streams pulling tens of thousands of concurrent viewers, and TikTok clips routinely clearing 1 million views each. Within a year, the guest list included Akon and YG. His career is a timeline of pranks, stunts, and multiple arrests across several countries, including a prison stint in the Philippines and a reported deportation back to Russia in early 2026. For 15 years, he's consistently migrated toward whichever format generates the maximum level of attention. His pivot to predator catching in January 2024 followed this same pattern of chasing high engagement trends. The problem with Vitaly's transition into the genre was the quality of the work itself. While veteran catchers focused on building cases that could hold up in court, many inside the community argued that Vitaly's approach was sloppy and prioritized the immediate spectacle of the livestream. By multiple accounts from inside the catcher community, he was doing it badly. In a public community post, Gideon posted a screenshot of the training document Vitaly's head decoy sends to new trainees. The instructions include telling decoys to use your younger age to your advantage, to manipulate targets emotionally, to make jokes as a kid would, and the line Gideon specifically flagged, to send other predators explicit images to current targets when asked. Those are the kind of shortcuts that don't fly in a courtroom. By instructing decoys to manipulate targets and share explicit images, his team creates liabilities that ruin the evidence. Real catchers specifically avoid those practices to ensure their cases hold up in court, and Vitaly ignores these standards because his goal is to entertain a livestream audience rather than secure a conviction. As a result, his catches rarely lead to arrests. The suspect walks away, the clip trends for a few days, and no one faces any legal consequences. This focus on pure entertainment explains why a celebrity like Akon gets involved. Vitaly's streams routinely pull tens of thousands of live viewers, offering direct access to a massive, highly engaged demographic. Appearing on the broadcast is an easy marketing play, and it keeps an older celebrity relevant with a younger audience and generates clips that will blanket social media platforms for weeks. However, Vitaly only achieved this level of success because the groundwork was already laid. He capitalized on a market that other creators spent years legitimizing. To see how predator catching evolved into a mainstream spectacle, we need to go back to 2020 and look at the independent operators who actually rebuilt the format from the ground up. Meet Alex Rosen.
19 years old, I've always wanted to be a police officer. I couldn't do that in Houston, Texas, where I'm from. At 19, you got to be 21 to graduate the academy. At least that's what it was a couple years ago. I don't know now.
That realization locked the entire premise of his career into place. The supply of targets was effectively infinite, and the format NBC had cancelled could actually be done by just one person with a smartphone. He named his channel Predator Poachers, and he worked primarily on Grindr, a deliberate choice that meant he never had to have images of underage girls on his phone, sidestepping a massive legal risk. By early 2021, he had a handful of catchers online and a slowly growing audience. His methodology at the time was still raw. The decoys were untrained adults, the confrontations were sloppy, and the handoff of evidence to police was inconsistent. He was better organized than the 2016 wave of catchers, but he was still an amateur. And then, on April 20th, 2021, Alex Rosen caught Bryant Morland, better known as EDP-445. EDP was already a massive internet figure with an established audience. Because the target was a high-profile creator, the sting immediately crossed into the broader commentary ecosystem. Major channels like Some Ordinary Gamers and Penguin ZO covered the confrontation, funneling millions of viewers directly back to predator poachers. EDP posted an apology that was universally rejected and was caught a second time a year later.
Get the fuck out of here.
You know,
This is not a fucking joke, man.
I'm just seldom at a loss for words. You know, 2 years ago you were caught
Kiss my ass.
in 4K trying to meet a 13-year-old and
Really,
I'm not talking to you.
Why-
I'm talking to
Really,
you.
my nigga, this is bullshit, man, that y'all pulling right now?
Exposing an internet celebrity served as the exact catalyst needed to push the predator catching format into the YouTube mainstream. The success of the EDP video highlighted the underlying psychology and mechanics of why this niche performs so well. The structure of a sting operation relies on pre-built suspense. The wait for a target to arrive guarantees a high watch time, which is then extended as viewers wait for a resolution or for the police to show up. The format also provides the viewer with a moral permission slip. Watching a man be humiliated for sport is typically in poor taste, but watching a crime being interrupted reframes the entire experience into something justified. Additionally, the content requires zero context. A brand new viewer understands the stakes in 10 seconds without needing a backstory or canon. Every video operates as a cold open that resolves itself inside the same upload. And as Rosen discovered in 30 minutes, the supply of subjects is effectively endless. With every catch natively cuttable for shorts, one long-form upload can easily become 10 viral clips, meaning a single afternoon sting can run across YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook simultaneously for weeks. This combination of high retention, infinite supply, and easy repurposing created an optimized content machine that allowed the main players to rapidly scale their operations. Rosen, for one, was able to professionalize his structure, with predator poachers now running trained decoys, armed security, a structured 911 protocol, and an interrogation method that, in the words of the operators who collaborate with him, produces on-camera admissions most detectives can't replicate. Meanwhile, Skeeter Jean had actually started 6 months before the EDP catch in late 2020. He confronted predators he met on Grindr and Michigan grocery store parking lots with his cameraman's old photos as the decoy. As Skeeter Jean's channel grew, he noticed that while the amateur wave was busy with shaky cameras and uncoordinated shouting, they were ignoring the visual theatrics that had made the original television show so memorable. He leaned into the Chris Hansen aesthetic, adopting the blazer, the printed chat logs in a binder, and the signature "have a seat" delivery. By leaning into this persona, he successfully branded himself as Skeeter Hansen and even surpassed 2 million subscribers by early 2025. The adoption of this persona eventually caught the attention of the real Chris Hansen, and during a podcast appearance, Hansen dismissed the new wave of internet catchers, specifically comparing their efforts to Paw Patrol. Rather than distancing himself from the critique, Skeeter leaned into it for his audience, publicly claiming to have ordered a Paw Patrol costume to use in a future sting as a direct nod to the comment. Gideon arrived last. A Houston YouTuber with a long career of throwing ideas at the wall like prank videos, reaction content, stunts, by 2023 he had grown tired of it. On the Steve O podcast, he describes the pivot in his own terms, citing the Corinthians biblical verse about a child putting away childish things when he becomes a man. He publicly walked away from pranks and launched EDP Watch. Combining his already established massive fan base with predator catching being the hottest format on YouTube, the project scaled fast. He runs a paid decoy network at $1,000 per catch and a standard interrogation method he describes on the pod as stall and report. Keep the target comfortable, keep them talking, call 911 on a script, and stall until the squad car arrives. He collaborates frequently with both Rosen and Skeeter, and for most viewers discovering the genre after 2023, Gideon is the face of it. By 2024, they'd effectively cornered the market on high-stakes pro-police stings. However, this shift toward legitimacy created a clear divide in the community. As the genre moved away from its amateur roots, the debate was no longer just about how to catch a predator, it was about who had the right to call their work justice. This tension is exactly what led to the internal fracture of the genre, separating the creators building legal cases from the clout chasers looking for viral moments. The platforms moved against the genre before the legal system did though. Around 2022 and 2023, YouTube began mass demonetizing predator catching content, then issuing channel terminations and then full bans. Dads Against Predators, another big player in this space, has confirmed losing channels multiple times. Skeeter Gene has said publicly that the only way to stay monetized is to scrub every reference to the underlying crime, bleeping the ages and censoring the words, for instance, which can strip the context that makes the video coherent in the first place. Even as we do research for this very video, we found that a lot of the older channels and videos we referenced no longer exist on YouTube. This inevitability forced the catchers to migrate. Platforms like Locals and Rumbles have Dads Against Predators, Skeeter, and Gideon posting content. Which brings us to the split inside the genre itself. Gideon draws the line explicitly on Steve-O's podcast. He drew a hard line between his circle and clout chasers like Vitali, arguing that operators who assault targets or let them walk away without involving police are chasing views rather than justice. He distinguishes his collaborations with Rosen and Skeeter as the right way, focusing on building a chain of evidence that can survive in a courtroom. Rosen's Branson arrest in March 2025 is the clearest demonstration of what that right way actually produces. The target had already been caught once in October 2024, and the local DA declined to prosecute. Rosen confronted the target a second time in public at the target's workplace, and Rosen got arrested himself on a disorderly conduct charge. Although it's worth noting the target did eventually get charged the second time round as well. It's the ultimate irony of the genre's evolution. 20 years after Chris Hansen's Blueprint debuted on NBC, the format is being pushed forward more aggressively by independent creators than by the network that invented it. A professional catcher was willing to accept a charge just to force the legal system to acknowledge a felony it had originally ignored. When NBC pulled the plug on To Catch a Predator, the network assumed the legal liability had simply outweighed the entertainment value. What they didn't realize was that they had inadvertently proved a concept. They proved that audiences will show up by the millions to watch a moral absolute play out in real time. The network may have walked away, but the demand stayed. The YouTube ecosystem took that demand and stripped the format down to its most profitable components. Million-dollar production budgets were replaced by smartphones and free dating apps, and network legal departments were replaced by independent trial and error. And the creators who survived the platform purges and the clout-chasing era had effectively built private law enforcement agencies funded directly by their viewers. This is the reality of the genre today. The internet has successfully crowdsourced a parallel justice system that routinely forces the hands of local police and puts actual predators behind bars. Yet, it remains a system driven fundamentally by the mechanics of the creator economy, with views and watch time still being one of the top priorities. This leaves a massive unresolved tension at the center of the format. If a predator is arrested and convicted, does it matter if the person catching them is getting paid for the footage? Are creators like Rosen, Skeeter, and Gideon filling a critical gap that overwhelmed police departments simply can't handle? Or is the financial incentive of going viral fundamentally incompatible with real criminal justice? I personally think they are filling a critical gap that just can't be filled by the police, but I'm curious to hear what everybody else thinks in the comments section below. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching and stay curious.